morning. My name's Lex. I'm glad to be here and appreciate your time and attention. Also have the dubious distinction here of talking to you before lunch. So hopefully that's not too much of a demotivator. So I'm going to talk to you about a process that Amazon uses that may or may not be familiar to any of you. First question, how many folks in here are Amazon customers? Show of hands? Okay, quite a few. Very good. How many folks are customers of Amazon Web Services, our cloud computing group? Anyone? Okay. Perhaps indirectly working with Ataccama, who knows? Well, very good. A lot of what Amazon does has arisen and been improved over time by trying to find things we call mechanisms that will help the company scale up. And I hope this presentation is somewhat interesting to you. This process that we use called working backwards can in fact be used by you. It isn't necessarily new, it's just the way we use it is somewhat novel. So you may have heard about our mission, which is to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And you could think of that as perhaps being a little high level or simplistic, but it, as a principle, as a mission, really kind of drives everything we do. And this working backwards process that I'm going to talk about is a very good indication of that. So we try very hard to focus on what our customers need. And this is across many different businesses at Amazon, not just the cloud computing group, not just the retail group or devices group, but in all parts of the company. And so we'll try very hard to understand what a customer wants and work backwards. We also have this principle. We have a system of what we call leadership principles that you may have heard about, which drive the business. And with 1.5 million or so employees, it's important to have a system of principles or rules or guidance for folks to use in their daily work to try to figure out how to solve problems and improve the business. Customer obsession is one of those, and we work very hard to try to earn customers' trust. And we do, of course, pay attention to competitors, but we feel very much that if we pay attention to customers more carefully, then all of the market position and competitive situations that we encounter will work in our favor. So we have a lot of different businesses, some of which you may know about, some of which you may not know about. So we're in the retail business, both e-commerce and physical stores. We have lots of subsidiaries. Anyone been to an Amazon Go store where you walk in and just walk out with a sandwich or a beverage or something of that nature? Okay. So that's one of our retail stores, Whole Foods, of course. Interestingly enough, the example I'm going to go through relates to how the Amazon Go stores actually were founded, and the principle around them was developed, and it was a working backwards project. We've got Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing group. We've got a devices organization that produces all sorts of things, Alexa devices, Ring doorbells, Ring lights, you name it, lots of devices there. And then we've got the Prime Video offerings and lots of consumables to sell. This is kind of an interesting statement. Jeff Bezos, who's pretty well known as the founder of Amazon, wrote a letter to shareholders, and these letters to shareholders are quirky and interesting and very deliberately written, but they laid out some seminal thinking that we use, even though it's 6 or 7 years later. So if you read this letter to shareholders, Jeff talks about the fact that even when you're doing well, even when your company is running on all cylinders and your customers seem to be buying what you have, it's something that you should expect for them to be continuously and kind of wonderfully, if the way he puts it, dissatisfied. Right? So they're always going to ask you for more. Anyone know the children's book called If You Give a Moose a Muffin. Anyone heard of that one? Probably the moms in the room. Well, the story goes, and kids love this book, if you give a moose a muffin, he's going to want butter with that. If you give him butter and put it on the muffin, well, he's going to want jelly, and on and on. Well, this is the principle Jeff is talking about, that it's never enough to produce a really well thought through product, deliver it to the customer, support them well, have fair pricing, and so forth. Not enough. You need to come back and continue to delight them further. And lots of invention comes as a result. So we use this process, and you'll recognize if you've been through business planning in your business or founded a startup or gone to business school, whatever, you'll recognize some parts of this process. So we start with who's the customer. Be specific about the context and needs. And here I'm going to use the Amazon Go store as the example. So what's the customer problem or opportunity? And you need to be very specific here. So this is business planning 101, right? But it is part of the working backwards process. What does the customer care about? And do you really know what the customer wants? And overall, what does the customer experience feel like, look like? What is the impact that your process is going to make? So you can kind of start with if you've done some Agile work in your companies, anybody an Agile practitioner here? Okay, so if you've done Agile thinking, you, as a product owner, think about a customer or a user and what it is that they're going to do. What's their problem? How are you going to solve it? You can get very granular with this, but in this case, we're thinking of a business offering. So let's talk about these Amazon Go stores. So busy, on-the-go, tech-savvy urban dwellers, I'm kind of walking through the process here, don't want to fight crowds, don't want to stand in long lines. I don't know if anybody wants to stand in a line of any kind. And usually in the corner store, like a 7-Eleven or a Cumberland Farms up here in the Northeast, or another kind of convenience store, you just want to grab a few things and out the door you go. You're in a hurry. That's why you're at a convenience store. So they just want a few things, maybe a sandwich, maybe something to eat, and off you go. So that's the customer problem. So how might we improve their experience? Well, make credit card swiping faster? Well, that's probably too narrow. Sure, that might help, might get rid of a second or two, but it's not going to get rid of the lines, right? Use automated checkout? Sure, certainly better. Eliminate the process of checking out altogether was the conclusion. So the idea of just walk out, right? So there's a whole lot of machine vision, machine learning, and very smart sensors in the stores that literally watch everything you do. It's a little bit creepy. If you look up, there's a bunch of glass and cameras of various kinds. But basically all they're doing, along with sensors in the shelves that you interact with, is allowing you to take something out, put it back, think about it, take it out again, and then literally just walk out of the store and not be stopped by anyone or anything. So the most important benefit in this working backwards example is no lines, no checkout, really, no kidding. So how do we do this? This is where it gets a little interesting. And the Amazon Go stores actually went through this process. Start literally with a press release. At some point in the future, say a year from now, year and a half, 2 years from now, an announcement that says Amazon has created a new kind of store where you can just walk out with customer quotes and partnership discussion and an explication of the benefits, and then an FAQ document. How much does it cost? How does it work? Do you have to download something to your phone? How about your Amazon account? What about if you get charged for the wrong thing? What if it doesn't work? What if my credit card is wrong? All of those kinds of things. So anything you could think of that could possibly come up as a frequently asked question. And we'll also create storyboards, which is nothing new in the design process. Lots of folks use storyboards to describe a product or a service. But we put all of these things together, and interestingly enough, let me just ask the audience, how long do you think the average press release and FAQ document set gets reviewed? How much time would you think? And let's take a guess at how long the Amazon Go store PR FAQ was in review. 3 weeks is one guess. 6 months. 6 months. Many, many meetings with all sorts of customers, vendors, partners, suppliers, focus group participants. So literally, senior leadership, folks that had the idea, that wanted to run this organization, literally spent 6 months on this before anything was funded. And what's interesting about this is they got most all of it right. They made a few mistakes, and there's certainly improvement going on in these Amazon Go stores. And there's more different kinds of markets that the Go stores are getting into. But the technology, the Just Walk Out technology, absolutely, positively exists and works very well and is being offered to others for their own stores, which is kind of cool. So a second business or additional business, partnership-driven business. Okay, so this is what's different about the working backwards process. We do workshops with our customers, Amazon Web Services customers in particular, and we will kind of frame it as a digital innovation method. We'll teach you how to do this. We'll show you the artifact examples, and we'll help coach you through the process. It's kind of a bit of free consulting, and the reason that we do this is we want to see our customers innovate. We want to see them create new products and new revenue opportunity. We win when, literally most of the time after, they win, right? So if they have a winning idea and a winning concept that's had some discipline put to it, then we will be a good partner and hopefully ride along and benefit as well. So the press release that we write literally focuses on the customer need. Customer quote's very important. It has to bring forth the benefits that were envisioned. And generally speaking, this is a real customer, or 2, or 5 that we might have in the press release. And it's important, we have another leadership principle around thinking big. It's important that this is a big enough business. The hurdle rate for Amazon new businesses is in the billions of dollars. So, you know, a venture capital-oriented funding interaction, the venture firms normally want, 5-to-1 return on their investment. So if they're going to put $100 million in, they're going to want to see a $500 million return within 5 years. The hurdle rate at Amazon is just larger, right? So, and we're willing to invest for the long term if we think that it's a large market that will serve customers well and be a very large business. So you can use this in a smaller business context. And what's interesting about this is it's sort of like the product manager's discipline driven to an extreme. Product managers are supposed to understand their customers. They're supposed to understand the benefits. They're supposed to understand P&L forecasting and thinking big and so forth. But you kind of put this process to an extreme when you need to go up into the billions of dollars. And certainly you do have to think about competitors and technological difficulties. Sometimes the technology that is needed, in the case of the Go stores, it didn't exist. So we had the building blocks. We had machine vision building blocks. We had all sorts of sensors and IoT capability. We had the cloud. We had capable software developers. But this Just Walk Out capability really hadn't been invented yet, so multiple inventions as well. We also have a writing discipline at Amazon, and you're coached to write kind of at the 6th or 7th grade level and to use as simple and least flowery language as you can. So on the left, we use a bunch of jargon talking about things that are important to us. On the right, we talk about things that are simple and easy to understand, as an example. So there's a lot of discipline in what we write, and you may have heard about Amazon not using PowerPoint much and circulating documents. So at a meeting like this, if we were all considering something, I might hand out or virtually send documents to you to read, and we might read for 15 minutes before we had a discussion rather than me standing up here acting like I know everything, right? because I don't. So the process is an iterative process, and when I mentioned the 6-month period of time for the Amazon Go store, this was before it was pitched to be funded at some number of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Physical locations, all the software engineers that needed to be hired, all the equipment that needed to be tested, the prototyping labs. Well, before all that was built, the testing and iteration of the concept using the working backwards process followed this loop here before we got started. So you really can use this process and we will help you with it. That's really all I had to say. It's a fairly simple presentation. There's a much longer version of it, but what I'd like to ask is if anyone had questions or is curious about how this works in practice. Would anyone see this of use in their own company? Sorry, I can't see you without holding my hand up. Okay. All right. A question?
Thanks for sharing the presentation. So you spoke about it in the context of a large business.
Yes.
But do you do multiple releases, new products all the time, incrementally, right? Not just large business. So do you apply the same principle, and how would you apply the same principle in the multiple releases you do weekly, daily, sometimes?
Sure. So the way to think about this is if we have customers who've asked us for a capability or can imagine that if they had it, they would be very satisfied and buy it or use it, then we will involve customers in the start of the process. There are times when we don't have a customer who's even thought of the concept that we're coming up with. But most of the time, there's a customer target or customer segment that we can involve. So I'll speak more simply about Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing group that I'm part of. Nearly all of our services have been built out of customer demand. About 90% plus or minus of our roadmap content for new features and new services comes from customer ideas. And before I joined AWS, I was a customer and I had a lot of these ideas because I was an early adopter of AWS technology all the way back to 2010. And often I would interact with the service development teams, the technology folks, not just the account team, and tell them, hey, you know, if you really added these 2 or 3 things, I could use this service and I would eliminate hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost. And they'd ask me a ton of questions, and then they would go apply this process. So the first thing that they would do is write, which I skipped over in this presentation, they would write a narrative describing the problem. And this is sometimes a 2 or 3 page narrative. Sometimes if it's a business they're describing, it's a 6-page narrative. And that gets heavily reviewed. And then if the concept is thought of as being viable, supported by more than one customer, then we start the working backwards process by building a PRFAQ. So we jam the 2 acronyms together and say PRFAQ, right? But they're 2 sets of documents that describe what we're going to deliver at a future time. And then we involve the customers in the process of refinement as we begin work. So you don't have to be building a billion-dollar business in order to use this process. What you will find is that if you really, really work hard up front, and this is kind of the, as I mentioned, the product manager role written large throughout an organization, thinking really broadly about an idea and how much it's going to cost and why customers care and how much it's going to scale and is it going to be supportable and so forth. If you really work hard on that, it's going to save you a lot of time on the back end. Because often companies out there still, to this day, even those who are adopting agile methods, perhaps less so because of the agile methods, will build a new product because it's been asked for in general, but they haven't applied the discipline to really figure out the feature set or the difficulties that might be encountered or the competitive challenges, whatever it is. And so they deliver an early version of it, toss it over the wall to marketing. Hey, marketing, figure out how to sell this thing. It's really great. Customers asked for it a while back. Hope you like it. and somebody comes up with a price and supportability issues and so forth, and out the door it goes, and maybe it succeeds and maybe it doesn't, maybe it's underwhelming and needs refinement. So lots of cost gets removed by doing this upfront kind of super focused work, and there's no reason why you couldn't do it with a startup or with a new service or a new product at your own company. It doesn't have to be a billion-dollar business at all. And when the first time you write a press release, it seems a little hokey. You're thinking, okay, I'm writing a press release, it's a year and a half from now, I'm imagining a customer quote, this is a little goofy, but that's the easy part. Then you get into the details, right? Why did the customer adopt it? What business benefit to that customer did it have? How much did it cost, and therefore, was it affordable? How are we going to support it? All those things. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. I have a follow-up on this.
Sure.
What you explain is, in common sense, we always say business case, or most of the scenarios we call business case. Does this process differ from when we write a business case, and if yes, what is the difference?
So the difference is, before the business decides to fund the undertaking, however many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or millions of dollars might be spent, all of this work goes on. So obviously at most companies there's some form of hurdle rate. Either the business has to be this size, or has to add an adjacent segment of customers, or has to return whatever it is 5x over 5 years or 10 years. Probably it's not as aggressive as the venture capital hurdle rate. So what you do is you do all of this work. Remember I talked about the Amazon Go store. Before it went even into our planning process, we have a two-fold planning process at Amazon. We call it OP1, or Operating Plan 1, which happens in the summertime of a given year, and then Operating Plan 2, where we actually sort the list and cut off at the bottom in terms of what it is that we're going to fund and how many people we're going to hire and so forth and so on. Before the Amazon Go store got into the OP1 plan, it went through this whole working backwards process. So then it went into OP1 and it was on the list, rank ordered with a bunch of other projects, and it made the cut in January, February of OP2 of the year that it was funded, and off the team went to the races. And they were very secretive for the first 18 months to 2 years, even though they had customers they were working with and suppliers and so forth. A lot of the code had to be written and it had to be proven that you could walk in. And I happened to be out in Seattle when the first Go store came out. It was near one of our offices. And of course, the beta test was, okay, Amazon employees, go get a sandwich and a drink at lunch. So of course, they kind of had to have, staff members out front saying, hold on just a minute, you can't all fit into the store. So we were in the store, ripping stuff out of the shelves, putting it back, running around, making a mess, right? And it was pretty funny. So it was a worst case beta test for all the eager beaver technical folks at Amazon to go in there and try to pull things off the shelf and fake the system out, right? Or make claims, hey, I didn't get charged for the right sandwich, right? So it was pretty funny, yeah.
We do have a question from the virtual audience.
Great.
Over the time you've been at Amazon, what kind of quantifiable changes have you seen using this methodology?
I'd say that what's happened is we've had more successes on an average rate, versus other new product and new service ideas that we would have had otherwise. That doesn't mean that we haven't had failures. We've had some very notable failures. Anyone remember the Fire Phone that went nowhere? Boy, that was a big smoking hole in the ground, right? But we learned from it, and some of the voice technology that was in the Fire Phone then became Alexa, which has become a super surprising bang-up success. So if you ask the senior leadership team and Jeff Bezos, they would say what we lost there, we gained later by having invented some new technology that really did work, and we had to learn by failing. So one of the things that's interesting about this is when we fail with working backwards or with a new product release or with a large-scale event, say at Amazon Web Service, where some part of a data center goes down, we have an operational problem. It's always about how did it happen and what did we learn from it, not who did it, who made the mistake, what was the fundamental error. It's causation and then learning. Right? So nobody gets fired by flipping the wrong switch and causing a big problem, because that's indicative, same thing with new businesses, because that's indicative of a bad process, not a bad person. So if you want to scale something up where you have literally millions of employees, you can't turn around and blame somebody who makes a mistake for everything bad that goes on. Hopefully you've seen some of this culture too in terms of customer obsession. If you ever had a problem with one of your orders, hopefully when you called up, you got to speak to someone who understood and empathized with your problem and fixed it, like now, because that's our culture. So we fail a lot. I want to say in primary answer to the question, I think we fail a lot less with new business planning and new service planning because we're so customer focused and because we use this process. And it is annoying at times to have to go through this level of diligence, because if you're the protagonist for a new idea, you're certain it's going to work. You absolutely are convinced that you've got a winner on your hands, and you've got maybe 10 big customers saying, if I just had it now, I'd be so much more successful, right? But that doesn't mean it's going to be successful as a business. So, good question. Others? Thank you very much for your time. Enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you very much, Lex. Love the idea of failure.